Hi everyone. In this video we're going to look at description in creative writing, and we're going to look at pretty much what description does and how we use it and the reason why we use it. So to start with, description in creative writing is something that is pretty much like the color to a picture. So you think of your structure as being the outline and your description is what colors it in. All right, that allows you to add some detail to it. It helps the reader to imagine what is happening in your story, and pretty much that color allows us to start filling in some of the blanks which we get from just the story. So the story is an outline, we know what's happening, but the description is what allows us to start filling in the gaps in our knowledge and starts, as I said, allowing us to color in our mind where the blanks in the story would be otherwise if we didn't include that sort of description. So how can you describe something? Well, let's look at some ways to start with. First of all, we've got using color. All right, the color of whatever it is that you are describing in your story. You can do it via shape. You can use the senses, the five senses, sight, touch, taste, smell, and sound, and you get the deal. Through movement, how something moves. You can get it through emotion, the way someone or something feels, and finally, the atmosphere of the story. So an atmosphere is something which helps to create a bit of a mood and describes what the place or the event is like. But we'll go through all of these a little bit in a second. So don't worry if you're confused about what these mean just yet. We're going to go through it. So to start with, we'll look at color. Now, color is really the easiest description to add because all you really need to do is just look at what you're describing and describe what color it is. Name what color it is. But of course, you can go a little bit more complicated than that. You can pretty much go beyond what the basic colors are. So if you're in doubt, you can pretty much think of what colors you would normally use to describe it. So for instance, let's look at a tiger. You would normally describe it as saying orange and black stripes. But we usually describe a tiger with orange and black stripes. So that could be a bit boring for someone who's seen a tiger described that way 1,000 times. So how else can we describe it? Well, simple search online. Maybe you have a bit more knowledge of colors than someone else, or even I do. For instance, I had to look online to find some extra colors because even though I usually use different color schemes, I don't usually remember them all. So we'll change it to tangerine and ebony stripes of a tiger. All right, both of these colors are shades of orange and black. They're just different ways of describing it, and we've got something a little bit more interesting than your usual orange and black tiger. We've got a tangerine and ebony striped tiger. And it's actually probably closer to the actual color of a tiger than orange and black is. So there we've got a little bit more information and detail, and something that makes that description of the tiger a little bit more interesting. Okay, so you can just go with the orange and black. That's fine. That will make us be able to see what color it is, even though we normally know what color a tiger is, but it helps us to go into a little bit more detail. Okay, so color is just the easiest description to start with, and it's something that helps us to immediately see what it is, and pretty much the color is the first thing we look at for anything. So if we're looking at a car, we don't see what size or shape it is, we see what color it is first. So it's the easiest thing, it's the thing that sticks out in the mind the most. Okay, so shape is the next way we can describe something, and by shape we can pretty much describe it by the way it looks through its size, its the outline of it, anything like that. So shape can include describing how large or small it is, or how big it is. It's how sharp it could be, if it's got a point, if it's flat, if it's round, its space, its height, its width, or anything else you can think of that describes its shape. Okay, so really those things are your basic description. So how big, how small, is it round, is it pointy, is it big, is it wide, is it tall, what is it? So you've got some basic descriptions there to start with. Then you can practice this with different things around your house and start to really attach different ways of describing something. So for instance, a great big lump of a couch that takes up most of the lounge room. All right. So that is how you could describe it, and it helps to sort of, again, allows your reader to imagine. It's not just a small couch that sits in one part of the lounge room. It's a great big lump of a thing, which sits right in the middle. All right, and that, again, it helps us to fill in and helps us to add a little bit more information about it that we wouldn't have got just through imagination alone. By having a couple of descriptions that help us know a bit more about the shape of it, we can start to imagine it a bit better, okay? So really easy like that. All right, rub that out. And we shall move on. So the senses are the next thing we'll look at, and the senses really make you or make a reader feel like they're part of the story. All right, so it's taking more than what we just normally see, and it adds sound, it adds taste, it adds all those things as well. So some examples. We'll start with sight, and I could barely see a thing. So that's how you can use someone's sight. You can sort of imagine not being able to see something, for instance. You can describe their sound. For instance, I heard rain crashing on the roof, and you'd use a lot of things like onomatopoeia, for instance, so the way things sound, to help us as a reader fill in what the sounds of a particular place is like. You can go with smell. For example, the smell of damp wood. So again, we start to feel more like we're there. We can start to imagine what damp wood smells like. Through taste, so the taste of sweat. So everyone at some point would have had during a hot day or after running around or exercising, would probably have tasted their own sweat before, and they would know what it's like. So it's not particularly pleasant, but we know what it tastes like, and we can feel like we're there. And finally, the touch. So the cold, rough metal bar. So anytime you walk someplace old and something that's a metal bar that's been out in the weather for a little while, we know what it feels like. So through using those senses, we can start to feel like more like we're there. Okay, so we can start to fill in some of the blanks that we had before. Now movement. Movement is the next thing we'll look at, and it pretty much allows us to have a bit more detail about how something moves. And we're going to do this by looking at an example. Okay, and it can tell us a bit about who each person is just by the way that they move, and something that good storytellers can do quite well. So I'm going to describe two people pretty much doing a similar sort of thing, but differently, so we can tell a bit more about each character. So to start with, his feet slowly slid across the ground, his knees wobbled, he looked like he was about to fall. With each step, the cane shook in his hand. So immediately you start to picture someone who's perhaps a bit older. Alright, let's look at the second example. He glided across the ground. His knees bent sharply as he made large strides over the ground. The cane spun and danced in his hands. So we've got there two different descriptions, and we've got them pretty much being two different people because of the way that they move. So this one we imagine someone much younger, someone more athletic and who's able to run around, whereas this one's probably someone a bit older. Alright, moving on. Emotion. Now emotion means that you ask, if I were there, how would I feel? So you think about your own feelings and what you would feel like if you were there. And then you would describe it as you pretend to be someone else. So when you're writing about your character and what they're doing, you imagine what it would be like. So you can use something like happy, sad, or angry, that's fine. Or you can go for a bit more detail. So try and imagine what you would do perhaps if you were there. And that's probably the best way of being able to use emotion. So her tiny head spun everywhere, there were tears in her eyes, she wandered around the same street over and over, hoping to find her mother. So if you were looking for your mother and you were 5 years old, then you probably would have your head spinning around everywhere. You probably would have tears in your eyes. You probably would be wandering the same street and being really upset and really angry and sad that you can't find her. So that would be how you would feel, and that would be how you would describe it. So you'd describe it how you would feel in that situation, or you'd describe it how you might imagine another child would feel in that situation. All right, and finally, atmosphere. Now, atmosphere helps us to describe a place or event. So it helps us to fill in a bit more detail based on what something might be like. So think of it this way. What is the place like? And if you were there, what would you be feeling? So it's sort of similar to emotion, but it's different in that you're describing the actual place itself rather than the character in it. So the place was cold and still, like it was stuck in time. So we can imagine something that's fairly empty, there's no people around. It's like there's no time, there's no space, it's nothing. It's just an empty place. Everyone was nervous, too scared to make a mistake. So you can sort of imagine what people were like in that situation. You can describe what the event was like. So an event where everyone's too nervous, too scared to make a mistake. We've got a bit of a feeling of atmosphere comes out. Something that's dangerous, something that may be suspenseful, maybe something that's really important. And finally, the streets were filled with people jumping with joy. So we can imagine something busy, something crowded, like that image there, where everything is exciting and there's lots of movement, and you can feel that atmosphere as well. So you can imagine what it's like to be there. And in summary, you can use these skills to boost your description. So this is why you're using it. You're using it to not only boost your description, helping to paint the picture for someone. So if you're drawing it, you're hoping to color it all in. It makes it much easier for your reader to imagine what's happening. So the more description you add, the better. And this is my top tip for the day, which is don't worry about using too much description. Now you may get criticized when you are trying to describe something for perhaps using too much. That's fine. Look, it's not good to overuse description, but it's much better to overuse it rather than underuse it. Okay, so if you underuse description, you're going to have a very boring, very dry, very stale story. If you overuse it, at least you can start cutting it down, and that will make it a bit better. Okay, so use as much description as you can when you're starting out, and particularly if you're not feeling that confident, just start describing things, and that will help you build your story a bit further. And that's it for descriptive writing and just the introduction to description. So until next time, I'll see you later.